your story is it's fascinating in how on the nose it is for a lot of other people's stories, but also different in some ways, I would say. You know, you made a comment earlier, I don't know if you realize, that you said you were privileged, that your parents have the emotional intelligence to have the particular relationship that they have with you. And you said something along the lines of how that's not particularly common with stories like these. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate?
I think one of the most common messages I get is from young people that either can't come out to their parents as atheist or agnostic or even just questioning because they're still living at home and they're relying on their family, and they know for sure that they would be kicked out. Or ones that maybe they're grown and out of the house, but they have kids, and so they don't want the grandkids having to lose relationship with their grandparents because they're very sure that they would lose that. Or people saying like, I've lost everything. My whole community shunned me. The church shunned me. A lot of times it's women that have gone through divorce, which I obviously sympathize with. So yeah, it's really sad to see that more often than not, you lose relationships.
Yeah. Like, I think a lot of criticism is geared at the atheist community because we often focus on these sorts of what people would characterize as extreme forms of Christianity,
Right.
which is funny because in many ways, I think evangelicalism is just living up to like what the Bible actually asks of people to do.
Right.
But you know, like people say, well, a lot of people don't actually think this way. This is just some people that do. But like, how popular is evangelicalism in the United States? Because if my memory serves, I mean that's it, depending on how you define it, it could make up almost a third of the population, right?
Yeah, that's what I read last.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge part, and it's a lot more young people than you would think too.
Yeah.
That
So I think you would probably say that because you're on TikTok and you probably see some of the Gen Z people like responding to
yeah.
you, right? Do you get pushback on their people responding to your videos and stuff?
Oh yeah. I right before this I had posted a video and you can tell which side of TikTok a video hits based on the comments you're getting, and
Yeah,
my video apparently just hit Christian TikTok because it's just comment after comment of you were never a real Christian, you're
yeah,
going to hell,
yeah.
uh, all of that kind of stuff. So I get a lot of pushback for sure.
That's the my least favorite thing when people say is that you were never a real Christian.
For sure.
And before I ever decided I was going to be on the internet and talk about this stuff, I fully anticipated that that was going to happen to me. And sure enough, it totally has. There's lots of people that have said, oh, I was never a real Christian. I never knew about X, Y, and Z apologetics, or I was never really saved,
Right.
whatever. And it never fails. It always happens every time when people come out. Why do you think people say that?
Oh, it's the easiest cop out because if
Yeah.
they can decide that you weren't a Christian, then they don't have to validate anything that comes after that. Like your story means nothing at this point. Um, I think that's why it's the number one go-to. And I also think that if they were to validate that I was a real Christian, then it would make them feel even more insecure in their own beliefs because it means that they're currently a real Christian that's capable of, questioning their own faith.
I think you're right. I think it does bring up those insecurities. I think I would also add that there is a theological through line that says once you're saved, like you have the Holy Spirit in you. At least that's what is very
Right.
popular amongst a lot of denominations. And if you have this thing in you, as long as you're listening to it, you're not supposed to be able to be separated by this. And of course, theologies will differ whether you can actually be separated by that or not. Some will say, yes, you can still be tempted by the devil or whatever and still, lose your salvation. But there's a very common interpretation that says, no, you're supposed to have always been a Christian because you're now being led by the Holy Spirit. And that's your life now. You've accepted that.
Right.
So that's a very, us coming out and saying, well, we actually don't think this way anymore. That completely turns that narrative on its head. You can't have both things existing in the real world. So you have to either say, well, this theology is wrong, or you were never a real Christian. That's the only other explanation, and that's where people go to. Very sad. to think about. But now that you're out, you're making stuff on TikTok, and you've got, of course, pushback, as we all do with these things. If you could start over, if you could kind of get things from the beginning again, would you make any changes to what you're doing?
When I first, and this lasted all of a couple of months, when I first started off on TikTok, my plan was to not ever say that I was an atheist. I was going to stick to very generic stuff. I was on what's called deconstruction TikTok, which is basically just, deconstructing your faith. And so I have a lot of progressive Christian followers. I have ex-Mormon followers, all of that. It's not necessarily atheists. And then I realized I was looking and I was like, there's no women on here that are atheists that are claiming this. I've since met a few, but it was really just like straight white men that were saying, hey, I'm an atheist. And not that their content isn't helpful and all of that, but there was just a huge lack of diversity in what I was seeing. And I think it's because of the stigma that comes from saying you're an atheist. And obviously, as soon as I said that, I got all kinds of hate and stuff. But I will say, even my progressive Christian friends get told, you're not a real Christian, you're going to hell, all this stuff. So it's like once you cross a certain line for evangelicals, they're done with you either way. But yeah, I wish that I would have said from the beginning, hey, I'm an atheist, and felt like I could own that, because I do think that it helps to remove the stigma, to have lots of different faces and different personality types and things to remove that general like angry atheist stereotype, which I still get called, and I feel like I'm not an angry person. So
Sure. Yeah. That's so interesting you bring that up, because I think you're very much right in that I think this is common knowledge by now. I think many people have said this isn't novel, but like the atheist movement, at least online as a presence, has had a strong bent towards the straight white male side of things, right?
Totally.
Like in the year of our Lord 2022, it's still a problem. I would say it's better now than it has ever been, but it's still like a thing to consider, right? And like when people picture like, oh, what do you think of as an atheist in your mind? Some people still go back to the white dude with the fedora and the glasses and the reading the Richard Dawkins book or whatever, right? Like that stereotype is still in people's minds. And in my opinion, probably because if you're a straight white guy, you obviously in general are more privileged in society and have less to lose when you talk online for things, right? So I'm glad you're kind of helping balance out the space there. But I also think it's interesting that you said you weren't comfortable with using the atheist label at first, and I think there's something to be said about that. I think we need to talk about this too, like the deconstruction space online. I feel like is afraid to say the atheist label in general, right? I think there are at least some content creators I've seen who are just there, who are kind of already just there, but they don't want to let go of that thing, right? And I totally get that. For a while, I was definitely an atheist, but I called myself a Christian mystic because I believed you can still have you can have personal experiences with God, right? Because it has to be personal experience, because everything else doesn't add up. And that's the one thing where people can't touch you at. Well, you can't touch my personal experience anyway. So I have a lot of thoughts about deconstruction space and tech, but you obviously have some experience in this area. Do you agree with these observations? Do you think there's people that are kind of there and maybe just don't want to give it up, or what do you think?
Totally. There's a lot on there that I hear them talking, and I hear their critical thinking skills, and I hear how they deconstruct and take down certain ideas. And then I watch them stop using that same rationale when it comes to spirituality, or when it comes to whatever part of their faith they're still wanting to hold on to. And I think that's totally fine, because obviously, until you're ready to let go of something, until you're not convinced anymore, it's better, I think, to be comfortable sitting where you're at and not force yourself one way or the other. But absolutely, all the time. And there's been several that have eventually come out and said, hey, actually, guys, I think I'm agnostic. And then they're like, hey, actually, I'm an atheist now. So I've watched that happen, and I've been like, yeah, I know. not to like invalidate where people are at, but it's just kind of like, if that's how you think, about X, Y, and Z, eventually you're going to reach that conclusion with a God claim as well. So
I think you're right. I think especially it seems like people I would say my age and younger are really into, I mean, labels are very important now, I'd say more than ever, right? People are very choosy and picky about how they want to put themselves out there on the internet, because you have a Twitter bio that just has, you know, a couple characters you can put in. What are you going to say? Well, these are the things that I like to talk about, or I think define me in this space, right? Obviously, I'm an atheist everywhere I go, but it's not like, you know, it's everything I talk about. It's just like what most people go to me to talk about, right? It's one of those things. So I can see how people could be like, well, if I put this label on me, then suddenly I'm a part of this community, and that, you know, there's obviously, you know, stigmas that happen there. So maybe as time goes by, and people feel more comfortable with the label, we'll see people using it more